A very good morning to you. Welcome to the West Ham Voice on a Monday morning. I hope you've all had a good weekend. I hope you enjoyed the Betway Cup, whether you were at the game or whether you watched it on the West Ham website. I don't know. I was in a pub watching it and got a bit messy. But anyway, I got through it, and it was, from what we saw on the TV, it looked like a half decent game, to be quite honest with you. And it looks as if it's anticipated that either by the end of Monday today or by Tuesday, we will be adding yet another player to the squad that Tim Steidten and Julian Lopetegui is building. Now, of course, that player is Aaron Wan-Bissaka. And we understand there was meant to be a medical carried out on Sunday, but that was cancelled. And we understand that he will be having his medical sometime this morning. He will become our eighth player, our eighth summer signing of this transfer window. And with an estimated spend of something like over 170 million pounds, I know that's gross. We've still got to take all the player sales off that as well. So at this moment in time, the spend is 170. With such a large expenditure, I'm sure we can all agree that Julian Lopetegui and Tim Steidten have indeed been backed by the board, and we're all looking forward to the season ahead. The club have only got to do one other thing, and that's change their stance on concession tickets so that we're all ready and waiting for a great season. Excuse me. With the imminent arrival of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, many fans would feel that this is the end of our essential transfer business. It's all done now, isn't it? Tim Steidten has managed to address quite a number of areas that we all know that needed vast improvements. He knew exactly where he needed to strengthen himself. He's gone out and he's done the business to ensure that we do not come up short this coming season. And we'll start from the back, where we now have a solid third keeper in Wes Foderingham, who will provide quality competition to the aging but still valuable Lucas Fabianski in goal. Now, despite his age, Foderingham has arrived at West Ham at no cost to us, free transfer. And despite many fans' reservations over the goalie, his stats are pretty decent regardless. Now, in his career, 492 senior career appearances, 166 clean sheets, averages out to a clean sheet every third game. Okay, granted, he conceded what, 80 odd goals when he played for Sheffield United last season? But let's not forget, our very own Alphonse Areola conceded something like 60 himself. And last season, we have to agree that the defences in both teams, Sheffield United and West Ham, were pretty awful. So I've got good feelings about Foderingham, and also he does the essential. He brings up our homegrown requirements as well. And then on the right side of defence, despite all the efforts to try and persuade Ben Johnson to stay at West Ham, perhaps he was all too aware that even if he did stay, he would not necessarily be first choice at the club. He knew, or we all knew, that we still needed to strengthen on that side of our defence. So he probably decided that it was best for him to go to a club, Ipswich Town, and I wish him well, where he would stand more of a chance of being that first choice right back, rather than having to compete against any new arrival coming into the club. But in order to give us a proper feel of what Wan-Bissaka is like, I think it's only fair to maybe look at the stats for him and Ben Johnson and Vladimir Coufal in order to be able to determine, are we getting a better deal in Wan-Bissaka coming to the club? And I think you can see from these stats, when it comes to Ben Johnson, regrettably, his average stats throughout last season were not great. But when you compare Wan-Bissaka to Vladimir Coufal, you get a slightly different picture, because Coufal still has his worth. Things like assists, he had 7 assists last season, more tackles made than Wan-Bissaka. Things like clearances, interceptions, block shots, etc. Again, Sufal came out better. Wan-Bissaka has better things like accuracy in crossing, take on. It's just a surprise that he didn't get more than 2 assists. Things like aerial dual success, ground dual success, etc. Wan-Bissaka comes out better. So I think, in general, I think you could say that given the fact that Wan-Bissaka is only 26 years of age, he can continue to improve. We're probably getting him at the height of his career. Whereas at 32, Vladimir Sufal, if anything, is likely to, with the greatest of respect, likely to start going on a downward path. Um, but I'm not altogether convinced that we are done in our transfer window for right back position. Because with Sufal having a year left on his contract, like I said, he's 32 years of age as well. I just wonder whether Sufal will enjoy being a backup to Aaron Wan-Bissaka. And whether he might decide, if there is interest in the player, apparently there's interest from Turkey, etc. I just wonder whether he will leave. And if he does, what will happen then? Well, I mentioned the other day about a Girona right back, Arnau Martinez, 21 years of age. He's valued at around 15 million euros. He's a versatile player. He plays primarily as a right back, but he can also play as a centre back as well. He's got huge potential. And perhaps if we sell Sufal for maybe £7 or £8 million, then we've only got to add another maybe 5, 6, 7 million to that to go and get Martinez, who, as I've just mentioned, can cover 2 areas. So let's keep an eye out for that. I'm not so sure whether our transfer business in right backs is completely done. And then we go to centre backs. And of course, we're still waiting for a decision, the outcome of what happens with Kurt Zouma. Now, I thought he was already on his way to Dubai for club Shabab Al Ali to take his medical. Nothing's been said over the past day or two. It's gone a little bit quiet there, so we don't know at this moment in time whether he has gone over there to have his medical. But one would argue that whether he does or not, his career at West Ham United is over. So we know he's on his way in some way, whether he's goes on a transfer or whether West Ham United decide to sever his contract with some kind of compensation. I guess we'll find out over the next few days. Now, let's not forget, when it comes to players that have come in, it was Julian Lopetegui's desire to bring in Max Kilman, one of the first players that we signed in this summer window. And then, of course, with the impressive capture of Jean-Claire Todibo from the jaws of Juventus, one could argue that we have the makings of potentially a formidable duo in those 2 players. I mean, if we're going to spend in total around about £75 million on this central defensive partnership, you're going to hope that they're going to come up trumps. But what are they better than the players than we've already got? Well, we've got to look at the comparison stats again. And the first would be to look at Konstantinos Mavropanos, his career at West Ham is being questioned at the moment as well, because he hasn't had that great a pre-season. But when you look at last year's stats, you compare Todibo's and Mavropanos, you can see it clearly is in Todibo's favour. Better passing accuracy, better crossing accuracy, tackles made, take on success, clearances, interceptions, etc. You can see Mavropanos is slightly better in other areas like aerial dual success, but overall, Todibo is the better defender of the 2. And then when you compare Kilman, who we spent a lot of money on, you've got to compare him to the players that we had playing on the left side of central defence last season. And they, of course, were Zouma and Aguerd. Now, Zouma, as you can see, I mean, hardly any of his statistics last season are anywhere near the level that it was should be at for a Premier League central defender. In fact, interestingly, the highest percentage he's got for anything is loss of possession of the ball. And then you look at Aguerd, he didn't have that great a season and he went missing quite a lot of it as well. And you can see again, his stats for last season were not that good either. Kilman stands out for almost every area of the statistics for last season. So you could see quite clearly that Kilman and Todibo are definitely improvements to what we've already got. And if, for example, if we know a Gerd is on the market, it's a possibility now that maybe Mavropanos could be on the market as well. I think we'll have to wait and see. But if we can get something like 40, 45 million pounds combined for those two players, that money can again be spent on other players. There was a suggestion last week. I talked about Wolfsburg's Maxence Lacroix. He'd be available for something like 20 million euros. And I've already mentioned Martinez from Girona, who can play as right back as well as centre back as well. So maybe for a combined total of, I don't know, 30 million pounds in comparison to moving both Agerd and Mavropanos on for more than that money, you could maybe see an argument why maybe West Ham United aren't finished in that market either. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Then we look at central midfield and the astute arrivals of both Guido Rodriguez from Real Betis, well, he was on a free transfer, and championship player of last season, Crescencio Somerville. And all of a sudden, the competition for places in midfield is looking rather healthy. It didn't go unnoticed that Lucas Paqueta was given a free role in the centre of midfield against Celta Vigo on Saturday. Mohamed Kudus was played out on the left of attacking midfield, although he equally had a free licence to roam into the middle as well. And then, interestingly, Thomas Soucek was given a role much, much deeper than the other midfielders. And I would imagine what Lopetegui was doing was showcasing the style of football that he wants in his midfield. And that would be Rodriguez, who would be playing that deeper role going forward into the season. Look, we will see a midfield. I think we will see a midfield pivot of Alvarez when he's fit and Rodriguez. And with Paqueta sitting just in front, and like I said, with Kudus and Bowen, either flank of a striker, what a formidable formation and lineup that will be. All these players are tough, hardworking, creative midfielders. You see over the past couple of seasons, the likes of Kudus and the likes of Bowen and all the other players and Paqueta, they like getting their stuck in. They they're not just flair players without any substance. They do go in for a challenge or two. And it's testament to Tim Steidten, who has managed to convince the likes of Rodriguez to come to West Ham United when he was on the cards to be going to Barcelona, etc. I'm sure there were probably other teams of similar ilk that would have been interested in Rodriguez, and the fact that we've got him is superb. Now, that does, of course, call into question what's going to happen to the likes of Thomas Soucek and James Ward-Prowse going forward. It's going to be interesting to see what happens, because I don't think either of them are going to get a lot of starts next season. I think they will get game time, but just how much, I'm not sure. Enough to keep them happy? I don't really know. And if we get offers for either of those two players, I think there's a possibility that Lopetegui may be tempted to move them on. Now, again, the issue with James Ward-Prowse is he's one of our 8 homegrown players. Well, he will be 8 when Wan-Bissaka will be the 8th when he's signed. But James Ward-Prowse is currently one of our homegrown requirements. And that's going to be interesting to see what happens, because if we let someone like James Ward-Prowse to go, what do we do to replace him? We're going to need to look for homegrown rather than all these players that we're being linked to from abroad. And then, of course, you've got Crescencio Somerville adding to the competition in midfield. Huge potential. He'll offer us something completely different on the left side of attack. And whilst he needs to be patient, I think he will get enough game time to demonstrate his worth. I mean, for £25 million, yes, I know there's up to £9 million in add-ons as well, but still, for that sort of money, we've got a talent that's going to grow over the years, and that is the same for Luis Guilherme, who is probably going to have to be even more patient than Somerville. You know, he's going to have to bide his time, probably a bit longer than Somerville. But these two very talented young players, with a combined price of something like £50 million between them, and a combined age of 40, you know, one's 22 and one's 18, they could become the players over the next couple of years who could be worth double, if not treble, their current value. Now, whilst I'm on about these players, I've got to tell you of my new sponsorship deal. I did mention it in a show the other day. Football Prizes have asked to sponsor my channel. Well, I'm very grateful. Thank you for that. And of course, in return, I've got to sponsor them. So, whilst we're on the subject of Somerville and Guilherme, the latest Football Prizes competition offers you a chance to win a signed and framed Crescencio Somerville West Ham boot display. Now, every ticket purchased for the draw at £3.95 a ticket also gives you the chance to win a signed shirt from Luis Guilherme. The draw ends on Wednesday, the 14th of August at 7:30 p.m. and the live draw will be made on Thursday, the 15th of August at midday. Now, there are only 165 tickets available for this prize. So if you go to the footballprizes.co.uk website, it will give you details of this competition plus terms and conditions. Now, please note, like I said, this is not a West Ham Voice competition. I'm not the one doing the draw, and I'm not the one going to get in the £3.95 for each ticket. Anyway, back to the squad. We've covered the central midfield. We've covered attacking midfield as well. And so it's going to be interesting to see if we do any more business there. But that is all dependent, as I said, on whether any more players might leave. And one of them that's a potential is Maxwell Cornet. Now, what happened at the weekend? He didn't get to play. I mean, George Earthy came on, several other players came on against Celta Vigo, but Maxwell Cornet was one of a few players that was not used. Now, he's fallen down the pecking order. He's had an opportunity during pre-season to demonstrate to Lopetegui that he has a role to play at West Ham. Now, for all I know, he may well still do. He's still got 3 years left on his contract, but I think if a buyer comes along, he will be another player that will be leaving in this summer window. And then to snatch the other area that we needed strengthening in is up front. And to snatch one of the best strikers at recent Euro 2024s was another stroke of genius from Tim Steidten. Whilst we relentlessly chased John Duran throughout most of the summer transfer window, Steidten was already making plans for the alternative. And whilst none of us could really make out why he went from a player like Duran to a completely different type of striker in Nicholas Füllkrug, we have to look at maybe, just maybe, the transfer that was done in conjunction with that of Crescencio Somerville's. Now, I do ask myself whether we would have committed ourselves to Somerville had the deal for Duran had happened. Now, I'm not suggesting for a moment that Somerville was not worth the pursuit, but I am wondering whether Steidten might have thought that Duran could have potentially been able to adapt to a role on the left side of attacking midfield. He's got the pace, he's got the ability, etc. So I just wonder maybe if that was a thought process. I could be way off the mark, but it was interesting to see how rapidly the deals for Somerville and Füllkrug were done the minute we decided to walk away from the Duran chase. Now, as for Füllkrug, we will soon find out whether this £27 million striker will knock Michail Antonio off his number 9 perch this coming season, or whether Antonio will continue to fight to be the number 1 striker at the club. Now, we know Antonio doesn't like to play second fiddle, and many might believe that Antonio being selected ahead of Füllkrug for the Betway Cup against Celta Vigo would suggest that Antonio will get the nod. Now, interestingly, I think it's highly likely that Antonio will start the first few games of the season. But I don't think it'll be that long before Füllkrug becomes first choice striker. And Antonio may not necessarily have a decision to make until after the transfer window shuts. Now, what I mean by this is this: if Antonio starts most of the games in the next month or so, if he starts, he'll think he will be the number 9, and then by that time the transfer window will be shut. And then, if Lopetegui decides that he now starts Füllkrug instead of Antonio, Antonio will then have to decide what he wants to do with his career. And it may be not until the January window that he might decide, well, hang on a minute, I am now second fiddle, and maybe I need to consider moving somewhere else in order to get first team game time. It's going to be interesting to see how Lopetegui manages this. Who he gives the nod to as his first choice number 9, and what happens thereafter. Now, one player most certainly is not going to be the first choice up front is Danny Ings. Now, he was another player that was left on the subs bench at the weekend, and I do not think he will. And I think maybe he'll reconsider his position before this window shuts. If the offer from Southampton is still on the table, Danny Ings might be tempted to change his mind over it. But we have the similar issue as we do with James Ward-Prowse. If Danny Ings was to go, again, we're going to need to look at replacing him with a player who's homegrown. So maybe, possibly, we might see the likes of Ward-Prowse and the likes of Ings being kept in the squad just to make up the homegrown talent and maybe not getting an awful lot of game time. It's going to be interesting to see what happens there too. So let me recap. Quite a lot of information to take in. We're expecting Aaron Wan-Bissaka to be confirmed as a West Ham United player. If not later today, Monday, then definitely Tuesday. He's on his way to have his medical on Monday morning. Players who could be on their way out include Vladimir Coufal, Dinos Mavropanos, Naya Fagerd, Thomas Soucek, and Maxwell Cornet, with several players continuing to be linked to us as potential replacements for all these players, and players who may get a stay of execution for this season alone could be Ward-Prowse and Danny Ings because of their value as homegrown talent, and a player who may decide on his future probably later in the season and maybe in time for the January transfer window could be Antonio, dependent on the amount of game time that he gets. Thank you all for watching. I think it's going to be a very interesting last few weeks of the summer transfer window. I think we've done our essential buying. We've done the essentials: right backs, centre backs, another couple of players in midfield, a striker, left-sided attacking players, etc. Now's the time where there's tweaking to be happened. And if the tweaking does happen, it means some players are going to be leaving with a few more players coming in. Thank you all for watching. Do hit the like button. Do become a subscriber of the channel if you've yet to do so. That I would really appreciate that. And I'll see you all very soon.